Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of our season-long recap of The Last of Us on HBO. I, as always, am Professor Noctis, and with me, as always, is Evan. Evan, what did you think of this episode? We are in episode 4, day 1 of The Last of Us season 2. What did you think?
Can you believe it? I loved the cold open. I thought it was really interesting. We haven't gotten a cold open like that in a while.
Not a like memorable one like this. And like this one really hit well for me.
I loved it. A locker room in an armored personnel carrier. I mean, I think if you've been in middle school, you have been in that conversation.
Middle school boys, especially. I mean, that's what it was. It was like.
Might have had that exact conversation.
Maybe. But I love the way they frame this because the entire time, about halfway through the scene, I was like, what are they doing here? Like, what even is this? This is clearly not in the game or whatever. But then you've got this one character that's like, why do they call them that? Voters. And then the camera pans, right? And you get this iconic character and it's like, oh, this makes sense. And they introduce Isaac, played by the incredible Jeffrey Wright.
Very excited. Very, very excited.
Yeah, you like Jeffrey Wright a lot. Yeah.
I haven't seen much that he's been in that I didn't think he did a great job in. So I think that he is going to be a great addition to this cast. The cast this season is so ridiculous.
It's so good.
We've moved so much more onto this kind of ensemble cast, and there's all these different plot lines that are going now, and I'm so excited for it.
Evan, and like that's one thing that even though I'm enjoying this season and I love the game and stuff, that is something that really excites me for the next season because I know these little vignettes of these just incredible characters. We're going to get more of them in whatever season 3 is because Ellie just kind of brushes up next to these for a lot of her arc, you know? So no spoilers for anything, but like we're really going to understand and see more of them, I think.
Everything is just more nuanced and more complicated in this game and in this part of the story. So I'm very much looking forward to the way they explore it. I think the way that they explored Isaac's turn here, we kind of get to see the moment that changes. You get enough time with the bros in the APC to realize that he's not really in on what we're going to call locker room talk here. And then he walks out and he's like, listen, and he kind of pulls the one guy out who my wife pointed out was from Drake and Josh.
Was he?
I don't know. I didn't have that channel. I didn't watch that, whatever. She goes, oh, that's Josh from Drake and Josh, I think. So you got to look it up.
Oh, we got to save Josh.
We got to check me on it now. I should have looked it up before we
we want to know that.
I'll look it up while we talk about this. So I almost called him Bernard as Westworld character. So Isaac, played by Jeffrey Wright, gets out of the car. He kind of explains why they're called voters and does it with what you don't know is just mostly apathy or a little bit of disdain mixed in. And we find out pretty quickly it's not just disdain, it's kind of cold burn animosity as he meets this kind of resistance fighter there and then turns back around to chat it up with the people in the APC. And it looks like he's kind of just going to put his grenades in there and just chill it out. But then he pulls the pin and slams the door. What does this say about him as a character, and how did it set up the episode for quite an explosive start?
I don't know if it sets him up like in a great way, in a great light. It's like, oh, okay. So, but it also kind of grounds like what he said earlier about the voters. We took away their rights. I mean, he's clearly turning here, and the guy that was questioning it, he's kind of bringing him along. It's like, I'm giving you a chance because you're actually asking questions and not just accepting the world as it is.
Right.
But it's clear that he's defecting from Fedra, which is just a really cool thing to see for this character of Isaac. I didn't know what was going down when it was actually happening. I was like, man, like this is one of those cool things about the show's continuity that I'm just like, I don't know. This could be anything. But to see him like shake hands with, what is this? A Hammer Girl? What do you call her? Hammer Harriet?
Yeah, I don't know what he called her.
Okay, he called her like Hammer or something.
I can't confirm if this was one of the Drake and Josh. I can't find it because IMDb doesn't even have the episode title up or anything like that. So, we're probably wrong. So whatever, we'll move on.
But we do know that the episode title is called Day 1. Okay, and that's really cool because in the game, not to talk too much about it, but it takes place over a course of days. And so so this is just day one. And so that's a kind of iconic sort of thing for those that know, even though it kind of riffed on some of the happenings of day one, which I thought, that was also neat. Anyway, like I thought it was a great cold open. And then you go into the title crawl with Lonely Ellie again. So
poor lonely Ellie. They're walking through Seattle, and they kind of make some astute observations. Ellie slams the tank lid open too hard. And
you know what they didn't do? They didn't swing the rope. Like there was so much swinging of cables and ropes as I searched through Seattle in the game. I remember, and I was like, that's the kind of gameplay element that I really think would play well in TV.
Yeah, in the game,
lassos.
In the game, you have to use a lot of rope physics, and they use extension cord physics to power a series of generators to solve
I'm joking. That would be terribly tedious for TV.
I don't know. Indiana Jones kind of made a meal out of it.
You know what? He kind of did.
So,
Ellie and Jones.
Maybe you're onto something there. So Dina convinces her, hey, maybe you shouldn't go in guns blazing. They are wondering why Seattle was covered in rainbows, the rainbow people.
Which so funny.
Well, the show almost always bookends
everything. It's like bookending it, right? That's
anything
so
the show
funny.
shows you in the first 15 minutes, if they open a window, they always close it at some point. Or they at least walk through it or crawl through it in their case. They do a lot of crawling in this episode. So they go in and they realize that they need to be a little more, let's say, surreptitious in their approach. As they...
And at the end, they're like, we were the rainbow people all along. It was the friends we made along the way. Okay.
We didn't even know.
We didn't even know it.
We're the rainbow people.
What a reveal.
It is. Nobody saw it coming.
Nobody.
So they end up in the music store, though, and we get this scene where Ellie is playing the guitar and Dina is observing here. Very emotional for Dina, and Ellie's kind of performing. She's got skills. She's thankful that there were silica packets in the guitar case, which allowed it to be in pristine condition. I thought, nice touch if you're going to give the character a guitar in pristine condition.
That was pretty
Joel's
good.
giving her some lessons. Tell us a little bit about this Take On Me rendition that we have here, and they linger on it for a while. What did it do for you?
There's a couple things it did for me. First of all, Dina was just perfect. Those wide eyes and just like in awe of Ellie, and just props to what's her name? Isabel Merced? Is that her name?
I think so. Yeah, I have to go back and check.
Just incredible acting from her. Just her eyes are so expressive in every single scene, and here they were. As big as the moon, just like looking at Ellie, it's just incredible. And then for Ellie to play that song, so this is iconic, at least in the game. It probably, weirdly enough, is my favorite part of the entire game, just because it's such a subtle and missable moment. But here, they did such a great job, I thought, of capturing that moment, and especially Dina falling and exhibiting falling in love with Ellie.
Yeah.
That's where this scene really, really hit for me. There's always a line in the song that kind of catches me by surprise. Not really that, just kind of like makes me hold my breath a little bit. When
Sticks
Ellie
out.
sings, crap, I just lost it. It's the last line of the second verse when it's like, better to be safe than sorry. And she kind of looks down, and Bella did this in the show. She just kind of looks down in this contemplative way of like, is what I'm doing really worth it? It's better to be safe than sorry. I'm not being safe. Am I going to be sorry? And it's such a subtle sort of thing that left an impression on me, and you kind of see that in her eyes and Dina looking at her. It's just a powerful moment. But it really also, the conversation afterwards is kind of like, yeah, Joel taught me that. And Dina says, he taught you well. And Ellie says, yeah. Kind of double meaning there. Yeah, he did. He taught me to play guitar, and he taught me to kill like a ruthless murderer.
Yeah, both are necessary skills for the apocalypse.
At this time, yeah.
A little poet warrior there. The show really does use music anytime it kind of alludes to romance. There's always some kind of musical moment that it allows to kind of reflect and linger on. And we get it about in the same spot as we got it in season 1 with Bill and Frank. So I think they do like to leave that music, and the idea that music is timeless, and that when you create something, it doesn't exist, and then when you make it and you put yourself out there and an artist takes a risk, then it exists. And because the artist put themselves out there, that somebody else could then take a risk on love because the artist took the risk to create and share their own experience, and that by sharing your experience you could express love. And then them going into Seattle with the rainbow folks and the risk that they take in their context, plus how that's couched in kind of modern society, I think is pretty tactfully done.
You know, one cool thing about this particular song is that it's the song that's played during the escalator scene with Ellie and Riley in the mall in the flashback of season 1. Isn't that cool? But it's like the fast-paced version, very lighthearted, and here it's kind of soulful, mournful, contemplative. And it's
That's
like,
a great catch. I completely forgot.
isn't that cool? Like, that's what I was thinking about. I was like, in the show's continuity, this holds maybe even a little bit more meaning. It doesn't come out of left field or anything like that.
Yeah.
Not that it didn't fit well in the game, but here I was like,
Sure.
It's really tight. So
That's a really good catch. Well, and we go from music arts to culinary arts with a scene with Jeffrey Wright and Isaac in the kitchen
segue.
as he turns on that's one of
Oh,
I
it was-
I worked
that was
really
a
hard
good
on.
segue, brother. That was, woo, kudos.
You know what? You may not be interested in what we're talking about ever, but we will get in and out of what we talk about quickly and with
beautiful.
a little bit of nuance, hopefully.
A little bit.
So he is opening up with he turns on the burner here and he's talking, and you can tell that he's talking to someone. He's definitely doing a bit of a monologue. You start to get the sense that it's more dreadful than
It's
it
like
is.
ominous. It's like, oh, we're not just talking about like selling kitchen knives.
Well, and he does, you only see his perspective for quite a while. And then when the camera turns and you're like, okay, finally, who is he talking to? It's a very naked,
Yeah, that's the reason for the nudity warning. in
very
this.
imprisoned, what we now know to be Seraphite, or as Isaac describes them as scars. So we get some of his character building. He talks about hopes and aspirations. There's a line that I do want to talk about that I think kind of kicks it all off, where he says, I've always wanted to own this cookware. Never thought I'd get there. But he says, quote, the strange benefits of the apocalypse. He just ponders this. He's thinking about his place in the world and what he's accomplished and how he's still somehow achieving his goals. And then he's not very nice to this person that he calls a scar. He wants some information from them. He wants to know where the next attack is going to be. Up to this point, we haven't seen these Seraphites or scars do much attacking, so we're starting to build some other elements here. Tell me about this scene. He wasn't very kind, and they used the people outside of the room to kind of show the brutality, but the justification for it. But I thought that the scene was uncomfortable, and that was the point.
Yeah, I thought it was a great scene. The tension is high. Isaac is he's the kind of enemy you love to hate. He's the antagonist you love to hate, because it's like he is so charismatic and he's so he just captivates the attention. And so during the let me tell you about these pots and pans scene, I honestly was expecting you to be like, I have an eccentricity that I'd like to share, and you're going to talk to us about it, pots and pans. But he kind of did it for you. He was like, let me tell you about copper, and let me tell you about the way that it conducts heat, and yet it doesn't go up to the handle. And all. It was just really, really interesting. But the thing that stuck out to me, again, as a guy that delves and dwells in the world of religious studies, was the Seraphite / Scar himself.
Yeah.
And I was like, his response in all of this is so steadfast. And I was like, this is classic mentality of devotion, faith, and loyalty. He's
got a mantra that he's saying,
so good.
repeating to himself, that he kind of sits with. I think Isaac is complicated, and he's instantly complicated because what we've seen in the first scene is something that I think, as the audience, we were cheering for. Fedra bad. They took away the right to vote. Fedra's still bad in Seattle, so now Fedra bad, resistance good, right? They're freeing people, so great. There it is. That's it. So then he's torturing someone, and you're like, Isaac bad.
Isaac bad.
Isaac bad. Fedra bad too? What happened to Isaac?
And Seraphite's victims, because they were slaughtered in the last episode by the wolves.
Right.
And so it's like, oh, we're getting to see this now.
But then it inverts again.
And it does it again. Because later on.
Yeah, Isaac gives his justification where he says, you got to tell me where you're going to attack because this is messed up. You guys kill children and you weaponize children and what are we supposed to do if a kid is shooting a bow? It's not justified. And then he goes, you know what? It just kind of doesn't matter. And then the Seraphite says, but you broke the truce, which as listeners we're like,
ooh.
Wait,
there's a truce.
What truce? Right. So it's just, it's complicated. It's back and forth. Just a really well written, really well performed scene here.
It was great. And the other thing that I just kept thinking of was how chilling it was for this Seraphite to say to him, you're going to lose. And then he's like, what do you mean? Like, we have power. Like, look at all that we have. He's like, well, every day one of your wolves becomes a Seraphite and they never turn back. Like, we never have Seraphites abandoned to leave for you guys. So eventually you're going to lose. And that was really chilling. And that's some conviction of a kind of religious zealot sort of thing coming out. But it's also sort of this impending doom for Isaac. He's like, he's got a point. And I think that was a turn of like, we're wasting our time here.
Well, yeah, he clearly feels that way because we cut to the people outside who are kind of playing our perspective. Yeah, when we need to reflect on what's happening from what they've shown us, we cut out to them. We just hear a gunshot and the other guy says, oh, good, that's what. We never even see the face of the person who's kind of in the affirmative for Isaac. So,
oh, yes, we do.
Oh, sorry, you're right.
And it's Drake. From Drake and Josh. It is. And he's completely contorted.
But we see him at the end. Yeah, you're right.
We do. And I was like, oh, it's him.
I think it's Josh from Drake and Josh.
Okay, my bad. I never saw the show, but it's one of them. It's Drake and Josh. They're outside.
All right. You know what? We're just Drake and Josh.
I'm going to make them the thumbnail. Just Drake and Josh in The Last of Us.
It's not. Let's see. Drake.
I've never seen the show. I mean, I don't want to question your wife, but
all right. Which one? Okay. Which one's Drake and which one's Josh?
Aren't they twins? I've never seen the show.
Wait. Their real names are Drake and Josh.
Oh gosh, no, that's not
Drake
real.
Bell and Josh Peck. The show was called Drake and Josh, and their actual names were Drake and Josh.
Okay, so
does this look like him?
I don't. Kind of. I mean, I'm seeing it through.
Picture him with the helmet,
magic, without a beard. Drake and Josh. I don't know. I mean, kind of okay, I'm kind of seeing it.
He's not. It's not on.
It's not like on, but I don't know. Yeah, Josh. I don't know who it is. I'm gonna say it's not them, but I am gonna keep calling him Drake or Josh.
Was that Josh Peck in The Last of Us Episode 4? Josh Peck from Drake and Josh made a cameo in Last of Us Season 2, Episode 4. He played a Fedra soldier, Janowitz, in a flashback scene set in 2018.
You heard it here, everybody. This is breaking news. Josh Peck. Okay, so it was Josh, and Josh is a stone cold killer now.
So every day somebody leaves a wolf. So then he puts the pot back on the burner. He clicks on the episode of Drake and Josh, and he puts it on the CRT TV that he rolls into the classroom that everybody had when we were in elementary school.
Everybody, yeah.
To watch Bill Nye the Science Guy. And then you turn, and then, oh my gosh, talk about religious fanaticism. The Seraphite, butt naked.
Yeah.
Just
holds a hand out.
Just holds his hand out. Like,
it was so good.
It reminds me of there's a story about a guy who was, I think it's somebody really famous, and it's like a scientist or something, who was crushed to death. That was their punishment, was like crushing. Like, did you ever hear of the medieval punishment of crushing? Mm-hmm. They just stack rocks on you until you died from it. Which is a crazy, like, term. Basically, they're like, what do you have to say for yourself now? And he's like getting crushed, and he just goes, more rocks. I gotta find it.
This was a scientist that said this?
I'm gonna find it. Smith is gonna get so mad
He's
at me.
gonna
He knows.
lose this,
He
yeah.
immediately knew who I was talking about, and he's losing his mind.
He's losing his mind. Smith is our classic research assistant, one of our research assistants. So shout out to Smith. Thank you for all your research and your vast, vast knowledge.
Okay.
Oh my goodness.
Scientist who was crushed medieval said more rocks.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, we're gonna look that one up. So okay, getting back.
It
what?
was Giles Corey, a Salem farmer. He was pressed to death by the court in 1692 after remaining silent and refusing to plead during the Salem witch trials. His last words, though debated, are often remembered as more weight or more rocks. Because he wouldn't. And it was pressing. That was their punishment. Pressing, not crushing. Pressing.
Same idea. We'll just say it was a mistranslation. That was really well done, Evan. That's
Okay, so Ellie and Dina go into what we know as the radio building from the game. I think there's a scene in the game where you are in a bit of a news broadcast tower, and when you're there, you see some things and you kind of have a fight as you escape that. And I think that's maybe what we were alluding to here. We can't totally be sure, but they see a bunch of the Seraphites' handiwork here because they see the other side of the coin of this conflict that was alluded to in the conversation with Isaac and his Seraphite, we're going to call friend.
friend.
Yeah. And what do we see and what does it say about the conflict? And then we're going to talk about the theme.
We see wolves hanging from the ceiling, like 5 or 6 of them, and they are set there by the Seraphites. And so again, Ellie is seeing all of this, like, are these wolves? And then she realizes that it is the handiwork of those that she found in the woods that were dead. It was the Seraphites that she found last. So she's like, oh my gosh, are we in the middle of like some kind of conflict? And bingo, you are.
You are.
And so it's around then that there's like a radio that they find.
Yeah.
And other wolves show up. And this felt like just a TV version of a stealth mission of like, how can we get out of here? And I'm just like looking at all the exits. I'm like, okay, how would I get out of this situation? And man, they nailed the intensity there.
The pacing of the action on the escape and the hiding was very, very much an homage to the game and how the game has you solve combat puzzles, because everything in The Last of Us is a bit of a puzzle. So combat is also a puzzle, and then you have actual puzzles and stealth and things like that. In some games, combat is just combat, but in The Last of Us, it's always some sort of kind of puzzle to be solved with the skills that you've been given here. So I want to talk about the theme a little bit. So we have now completed what I would say is 2 parallel narratives. So if a line is 2 points, right? Then we only had 3 points here. We had Abby and Ellie, who are in a revenge narrative and a cycle of violence here. And then we introduced another cycle of violence with the wolves slaughtering the Seraphites, but we didn't have the other data point to know that we now have parallel narratives. So we have completely parallel narratives running through individuals and then collectives, but it's a bit of a love triangle here because it's like Ellie, Abby, wolves, Seraphites, and then we don't have anything connecting Ellie and the Seraphites yet necessarily, but we're going to be exploring that theme both in an individual sense and what that looks like as an individual to experience the need for revenge and the cycle of violence, and we're also going to understand it tribally systematically when it comes to the Seraphites and the wolves. So we're going to have the like super zoomed in macro microscopic intensity of an individual person, and then we're going to see and probably explore what that slow burn looks like in a cultural sense. That's pretty heavy, but I think we're well set for these 2 train tracks, and the train is just going to start leaving the station and start rolling really, really quickly here. What did you make of that? Do you feel like it's set up well, and what do you think we should be anticipating?
Listen, I really liked this whole sequence. I thought that the thing that I think that I'll remember character-wise from this is Ellie's like rage. We had talked early on. I was thinking about your jujitsu lesson from episode 1 when she like comes up and grabs the wolf from behind. And I was like, oh, she's jujitsuing him right now, like leveraging his own strength against him a little bit and weight and all that kind of stuff. It was really, really good, great to do that. But it didn't come out of nowhere. They had set it up from the early episodes and even the training in last episode with Jesse a little bit. But they narrowly escape and they go into this transit system, and just the like intensity was so big there. And then Dina's slow counting of how many there are. Like she's listening and she's able to like just hold up the finger of how many she hears. And I was like, oh man, this is just so tense and so good. And again, Dina's actress is just nailing it.
Yeah, they enter the transit system. The wolves come in after them. We find out that they threw some flares on top of some kind of cordyceps spores that are communicating back to the horde here. Oh. And Dina starts counting out how many clickers or infected there are that might be coming, and it kind of builds the tension because the wolves are talking about, I thought this was supposed to be clear and empty, and the person said, yeah, it is, but we just kind of got to find these folks because they probably think that they had something to do with the murder of their colleagues and wolves, friends that were back in there. And so in order to build that anticipation, Dina grows increasingly concerned as she closes her eyes and silently starts to count as she hears the same things. And she gets to 5 and she's out of fingers, so she can't count any higher. And then she starts getting really concerned. No, but that's when the horde hits, and we get this chase scene through the buses and transit and all this other stuff.
Do you like the number of infected we're getting this season? Because it's way more than it was last season.
Yeah, I don't think I haven't really thought about the quantity of infected and how I did.
And this is the second like raging horde that we've had this season.
I think hordes in this context are important because all you can do is flee. So it just sets the tone that we're running. Like that's all we're doing.
We can't fight through this.
There is no fighting. We're going to go. One thing that I did notice when it comes to the horde is that they have a kind of an infected that kind of clues you into what the horde might be doing. So there's always one infected who either is the one who figures out to push through the wire at the bottom, or who like turns and isn't paying attention to what the other ones are paying attention to and sees them and then screeches, and then the horde turns. So it's like a school of fish where there's one fish kind of at the beginning that sets it, and then all the fish kind of follow. So it's an interesting way to keep your attention focused on where the horde is headed rather than just having it be some nameless, faceless, rolling mass. They take the moment to really identify the action. And so it gives you a little bit of pause in the action, creates a little bit more tension, and then the horde kind of turns and then goes en masse. And that's a kind of common zombie thing, but I noticed it particularly in this escape scene. And I liked all the crawling through the buses and all that kind of stuff as they go through it, because that's very similar to some of the scenes in the game where you're like in the little bus with the bendy middle and the tube, and very accurate to what is present in a transit tunnel in Seattle, which is a good attention to detail, which I like. But they do kind of make their way out and escape here. And they end up finding the theater. But on their way to the theater, something very important happens. They learn how to navigate a turnstile. And while they're learning how to navigate a turnstile to get out, Dina is about to get bitten here, and Ellie takes a pretty drastic action.
She throws her hand in front of Dina's about to be bite mark, and she takes the bite herself. And, we, the viewer, know, well, that's okay because she's immune. So she shielded her, but Dina does not know that.
Dina doesn't know.
I was watching with some friends, and, they put it together right then. They were like, Dina doesn't know. Dina doesn't know. And I was like, Dina doesn't know. And so it worked for the group I was watching with. One word about turnstiles. I don't know if this is you. I have a terrible fear of those kind of turnstiles, because the way that the little things go like that, I have this irrational fear of getting stuck in there and then just being smushed through like spaghetti noodles. It just is always in my mind. I hate those turnstiles. They stress me out.
I think that's fair. I don't particularly care for any kind of entrance or a crowd management system if it just stopped, that I would not be able to leave. So like if a door gets stuck, I'm still in the room or whatever. But if you're in a revolving door or anything like that, if it gets stuck, you're just kind of stuck and you're in the fishbowl now.
It's so scary.
Yeah. Well, what if there was an infected coming after you?
I don't know. Would I rather be like spaghettied or bitten? I don't know. I don't know.
Spaghettied by an infected in a turnstile is probably
That's
getting
the worst
near
way to
the
go,
top.
I think. That's pretty close to the top. Of the ways that I want to go, that's like not anywhere near the top.
I will say this. I will think about it probably for the rest of my life now.
Any viewer, you'll be like, oh, Prof Noctis, Wade is terrified of those. And now I am too.
And I am also going to think about that when I use my pasta maker.
There goes Wade.
It's like, did you see the Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness?
Yes, I did.
When there's one character in that has another character and they have a particular fight and just turns them into a bunch of spaghetti
noodles. Yeah,
I was like, oh, I just love it when they do things where you can just kill superheroes. It's amazing.
I love it. There's no better death than a superhero death.
It really adds to it. So they get into the theater, and when they do,
Dina's shocked. Still, she's just like, okay, and just like watching her. They get into the theater, and Dina draws her gun, and it's like, oh, it's on. Because this is what you do.
Ready.
If someone is bitten, they die.
Yeah.
And this is such a great scene because Ellie realizes, like, okay, she doesn't know. Listen, it's not what you think. And like the room that I was in, we were all saying, what would you say to convince us not to shoot you? And what a great question is that? Yeah. Like, because like, I don't know. It's like, I'm immune. Sure, likely story. You just don't want to get shot. I've seen this before.
Yeah, order of operations is don't get shot right now, right?
Yeah,
so
that's like just probably first.
So I think I would probably turn to logic first. I'd say, I know that I got bit. You saw me get bit. If I was going to turn, we have a few minutes. So like, keep your gun on me. Totally fine. I would appeal to reason here. Or I would go completely random the opposite direction. And I'd be like, did you know who the #1 purchaser of kale was?
You go full eccentric. Like,
in the 1990s?
That doesn't sound like an infected.
It was Pizza Hut because they put it under their salad bar.
I can't shoot somebody with knowledge like that.
Yeah,
that's what it is.
You can't lose this mind.
You can't lose that mind. So,
what would you say?
I don't know. Not that.
I'm dead. You better be the one that gets bit because you're shooting me in a heartbeat.
If
bro.
you said that thing about kale, I was like, no, that's useless for me. I'm done. You're a liability alive. So
he's already turning.
No, he said, I'm not dead yet. Oh, you are now.
Infected or not.
After that kale thing, we got to get you out of this planet.
So
anyway, I think that I'd probably be like, okay, I love what Ellie does here. Like, I actually think it's probably a smart thing to do, to be like, hey, I know this is crazy, right? So wild. I'm going to go to sleep. I'm going to bandage my arm up. Keep that gun on me. Like, you follow protocol. And when I wake up, let's see again. Okay.
She does go very Clint Eastwood here. She goes, I'm going to walk to that chair real slow.
Real slow. This is how this is going to go down. I mean, it was pretty good. So, I think that I would probably do something like that. I would probably, honestly, I would have shown her my other bite marks. But again, it's like she already knew that like Ellie had burns there, but it's like, let's look a little bit more closely this time. But who wants to be close to somebody that's infected?
Well, you feel for both characters.
You do, because it's almost impossible. So,
and there are moments in life when your instincts are screaming at you that something is one way, but the evidence and reality in front of you might be attempting to tell you something different, that your instincts might be off.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a challenging thing that we often encounter in life.
I think
is
you're right.
when you get used to the way that things are, you kind of assume that A is B and B is C.
Yeah.
And then there are things that will happen that subvert that expectation. What do we do with that? And then let's talk about what Dina does with that. Like, what do we do in life when something happens like that, that we just automatically go to our assumptions that this is what it is and this is the way it's going to be. But then the reality, especially sometimes, and I think oftentimes, it's another person communicating to you.
Yeah.
This may not exactly be that. You may not have the whole picture here. And that's a tough thing to reconcile in life, let alone the apocalypse.
Yeah, one thing that I tell my students is that your first thought is rarely your right thought. Instead, it needs to be processed and filtered through knowledge, because sometimes our instincts are rooted in some impulses that are not part of our better repertoire, so to speak. So this is actually something that we talk about when it comes to things like stereotypes.
Okay.
Stereotypes are oftentimes our default first response. Now, that doesn't make it a bad thing. That just means it's the first thing. When something becomes problematic is when it's your second thought too. So your first thought can be like, okay, I've heard about this and I have assumptions about this,
Okay.
but you have to filter it and process it so that your second thought can be the course of action that you then take. This is what I tell my students. If you are from the North, you have certain thoughts about Southerners. So when you meet a new person from the South, you may have immediate impressions of who they are, what they believe, or all that kind of stuff. Process that. Wait for the second thought to come. So really what this demands is you've got to have a little time and a little space to allow that processing to happen. And that's exactly what Ellie does here. She says to Dina, she was like, well, we're going to take a beat. I'm going to go to sleep and you're going to watch this. And you can imagine Dina's night, right? Just kind of watching Ellie and waiting for the turn, and it doesn't happen. And all of her assumptions are being overrun by new data and information, which is what's so incredible to me about the next scene when Ellie wakes up, because it really picks up right where it leaves off the night before, because she's just got this blaring light. Now you think you notice things like this, light and darkness and all this stuff. What do you make of the light use here?
Great question. I am curious what they are trying to communicate with it visually. So Ellie wakes up and she gets water dripped on her and is kind of like, ugh. And then she goes, oh, wait, that probably sounded like an infected.
No, it's just water.
Which I actually really loved that.
I love that. That was funny.
Feel like she had it kind of broke the tension
When
a little bit.
It's a nice counter, or not kind of counter, but maybe a parallel to some ways of when Tess and Joel were looking at her and she kind of went, ah, to kind of joke.
Yeah, that is true.
And so now she's like, no, that's just water.
We already know that she does a good infected
She
impression.
does.
So that's good. When they open a window, they always come
They always close it a season later.
Everything. We definitely wouldn't find too much nuance in every little detail. And so the light opens and you can't see Dina at all, right? So
No.
all you see, it's kind of a one-way thing where Ellie is talking to a very bright flashlight in her face. So you cannot see the subject. So you don't actually even know if it is Dina. Theoretically, it could be someone else who has the flashlight, right? And so Ellie's talking, and as she starts to convince her, the flashlight kind of comes down, and then Dina brings out a warm lantern.
Now this scene got me too, because the thing that I was thinking was, this is such great. I don't know why I'm thinking such parallels tonight, but it's such a great parallel to episode 1, season 1 of the soldier with the flashlight pointing at Sarah and Joel, and you don't even see who it is. And then the second time you see the face of the person, and Joel does not care about the personhood of the soldier, just remembering Sarah in lieu of Ellie. And so here it goes back to that. There's this mentality of when somebody is infected, you're just at the business end of a flashlight and a gun. And that's the dilemma that she's in. Dina, though, repersonalizes the depersonalized moment with that lantern. And I thought it was so good.
Yeah, they
bringing
show
that warm light.
Yeah, they show you one-way interrogation, right? We've had an interrogation in this episode already, so it's in your mind. And then they visually show you the softening, the openness, the warmth of her heart as she's kind of moving towards Ellie. Lanterns are a lot more invitational. It's a we, it's a together, it's a sharing of the light. Flashlights are like a focus, kind of direction type thing. So we get they tell the entire story of what's going to happen between them visually with light before anything happens between them. So sometimes music anticipates different moments in stories. You know, the music will swell to more hopeful before the scene changes to let you know. But in this case, and I didn't really pay a ton of attention to the music in that scene, but they do it very visually, where the flashlight comes down, there's some questioning, and then you get that. No, I just thought visually that was some neat direction there. And then the sharing begins.
The sharing. Wow. So you have Ellie in a moment of vulnerability, and it's like, hey, see, I'm immune. I've been bit a few times now. It's like,
actually,
here's one. Like, this is an old battle wound.
Sometimes I let them bite me for fun.
And sometimes for love, as I did today. And then to reciprocate, Dina just says, well, I'm pregnant. And that's exactly how she does it.
It does seem like they've kind of laid all their cards on the table, and I think it was a little jarring for me because it was like they finally felt free, right? The secrets were out. Ellie let out her secret. Dina let out her secret.
Which we didn't even talk about at the beginning of this episode. Like, Dina is clearly finding resources in the pharmacy or the drugstore, and comes out and she's different. And Ellie even notices everything okay, and Dina is just a little bit more guarded at that point. And so she's holding on to this, and now she has this new fear of like, I am pregnant, and I gotta protect my baby. I'm gonna protect my life. But what she says, well, we'll get into that in just a second. After the sharing stops, the making out begins. And so this is when, I mean, it's just like vulnerability has now led to intimacy, and emotional intimacy, physical intimacy. And a lot of people were really upset that this particular interaction did not happen a few episodes back. And I actually think I like it better here.
So in the game, this kind of scene happens in the kind of recon outpost weed shop that they found themselves in. And so they
Jesse and Ellie were in it in the show, whereas Dina and Ellie were in it in the game. And they have this nice intimate evening, and then the stuff with Joel happens after that. So here they just kind of moved that to here. And I actually think that it's pretty smart to do that in a lot of ways.
The flow makes sense.
It's just a different telling, right? And so, it makes sense to me, especially in light of a conversation that was last episode, I think. Do you remember, like, in the camp, the tent, when they're talking about the kiss and stuff, and Dina's like, well, I want you to rate our kiss. How was it on New Year's Eve? And Ellie's like, I'm not talking about it. She's like, and they kind of go back and forth. And Dina says, well, I just want to know if I'm any good at it. You're gay, I'm not. And that felt like, okay, we're going to slow burn this love relationship and stuff. And it also lets us know that she had been with Jesse again. She got back with him after New Year's. But here, she begins to kind of clarify this a little bit more. And I thought that this was such a great thing.
So they choose to not interrupt the physical intimacy with all of the reasoning. So the characters have had all of their reasoning. So off screen, on screen they've had some time together, but we've only seen a small portion of it. But it's implied that they're very close and they've had a long time to be together. So the intimacy. So it's basically let's break it down this way. So it's basically secret reveal, secret reveal. I've never told anyone this. I've never told anyone this, right? So that immediately creates a level of intimacy. Then they go immediately into physical intimacy because I would say this has been building for a long time, but also there's just maybe a sense of relief. There's a connection that they feel. They don't want to express it with words. They're using their bodies to do the talking here in the way that they connect with one another. And that's very, very human. I mean, that is exactly what romance happens. As romance develops, the thing that's the difference between a friendship and a close friendship and a romance is often the physical relationship. You typically, and then, I think maybe modern times have changed some of the expectations around some of that a little bit from, I'll just say when maybe I grew up, which I'm not that old, but I grew up in an area that was not really part of like how you do it. But I hear students talk about it in a different way, their perspective on what it is. Not everybody, but I also want to recognize that. And so that is part of what that distinction is. So if you don't have that and you don't show the fact that they're physically intimate with each other, then you get that just kind of sense that like, oh, they could have just been close friends, which I think would do, and I probably don't have the best perspective to talk about this, but that would do a little bit of a disservice to the themes that they're trying to explore that they set up at the beginning of the episode to not show some of the physical connection, because especially with folks like that, they're, oh, they're just friends. Oh, they're just roommates. Oh, it's just this. This is the history. This has to be pretend for such a long time. And so I think that was probably pretty important for them from a storytelling perspective to do that. What did you make of the way that they kind of crash into that physical relationship after just secret, and now we're together? Well, it felt a little rushed to me, but I understand why it was, and we get to the reason why later that you allude to.
Well, I think that's it. If it had happened anytime before this, especially with the dialogue last episode where Dina says, "You're gay, I'm not," right? That's an intimacy that's not yet earned because they have not been emotionally vulnerable with one another. They've still got their cards close to the chest here. And here, it's all out on the table, and their immediate response is, this is earned. We've just shared something really beautiful together. And isn't that just the perfect bookend to the beginning of the episode when they talk about the rainbow people, right?
Yeah.
And it's the question of like pride on the wall and stuff. Well, what does that even mean and stuff? I can't imagine living in this world and being like, why were they drawing rainbows? Like, were they just happy all the time? Well, but then here it's like, well, there's a reason for that. I've got several friends that will wear like watch bands that have rainbow on them, but that's a subtle signifier to others that, hey, this is the community that I am part of. And it's something that it's a way to overcome that intimacy emotional barrier that you just kind of let rest on others' assumptions. I think that's a really interesting theme that's through here. There was a group of people that made clear who they were, and at the end of this episode, you have two people that are making clear who they are.
And I think the show is making the assertion that the show is definitely taking a stance to me here in the argument of, is this something that is more culturally derived, or is this something that's inherent to humans? Right? Is this a human concept, or is this something that has happened culturally, which I think is a big tension in kind of modern society and over the last 75 to 100 years, in the way that we talk about the way that people experience romance and love and connection and attraction to one another. And so as those things have changed over time, I think the show is clearly saying they don't understand. They don't know any of the cultural stuff.
They didn't teach this in Fedra.
Correct. This is here. This has been here. This isn't going anywhere. And so even in the apocalypse, this is a universal part of the human experience. And the show is taking the stance on that. And so that's what the show is saying. And I think it was an interesting way to explore that.
Really fascinating. Yeah.
The way that they set it up. So, whether they accomplished that goal, or whether you thought it landed, or whether you would even agree with that as a viewer, is kind of inconsequential to the fact that I think it is clear that's what they're trying to assert.
Yeah. The thing that I think, kind of coming in for a landing here with this episode, the thing that really sticks with me are some of the final moments of dialogue when they kind of say, well, why now? I think Ellie says, why now? Why tell this? And Dina kind of says a little bit about her process of accepting her own identity. You know, I told my mom that I liked both boys and girls. She said, you like boys. And I kind of took that to heart, and I, shut it down. And so I met Jesse, and, I tried with Jesse, tried to make things work because he's a great guy. But he wasn't the one. He wasn't my person. Mm-hmm. And I think it's always kind of been part of this. And so that kind of renegotiates the conversation in the tent from the last episode, which I think is really, really helpful in a lot of ways. Because, how human is that to like give a little bit of vulnerability and to wall up and then break through it again. But then Ellie asks, and this is the whole thing, says, why now? And Dina said, I was picturing what we could have, and there was a chance that we would lose it. Like I'd lost it in that moment. And then I got it again. And when you have this vision of something that is so good, it's, in her case, it's the two of them and their baby, right?
Crazy. Yeah.
And then you lose it in a second because Ellie got bit. And then you find out that the dream's back on, the plans are back on. That is the emotional response. And I think that anybody that's ever felt that sense of hope, disappointment, and hope reborn gets this. Whether it's in love or anything else, it's like, okay, it's back on. And it almost means more after you've lost it for a second.
It certainly qualifies the intensity of the emotion. Yeah. And I'm going to tell you why I like the way that they did this scene.
Okay.
Because I think that the entire time when it happened, I went, "Oh my gosh, is this too fast?"
Yeah.
Like, is this too fast?
That's fair.
And then you get this very nice, long, detailed explanation afterwards over beef jerky, where they're talking about what these things are. Ellie asks the question, says, "It's a little thing, but when you hide the little things, they become big things."
Oh, yeah.
Like that's
boy.
that. Between the strange benefits of the apocalypse and that quote, those are like my two quotes of the
great.
episode. But I think what they wanted you to do was feel if this was the question of, is this too soon? Because that's probably what the characters were experiencing too. Yeah. They're a little bit caught up in the rush. What is this exploration of some of these physical boundaries that we have? And they made you feel that way. And then you get this kind of justification and they talk about it. So you get the payoff, you get the emotional qualification. They give you the justification and the reasoning. And it's a really nice, sweet conversation that they have. But if you felt like it was a little jarring and abrupt, that kind of felt like the point of why they did it that way. So if you're like, that was, I don't know, that felt a little rushed.
Yeah.
Maybe they wanted you to feel how the characters felt in that moment, and maybe that means they did their job. But that's just my opinion.
No, I think that's exactly right. The end of the episode for me, thinking about that, they go up on the rooftop and they kind of see, where they're going to go.
Right.
And Ellie has just got a vision of what life could be. And I just wanted to be like, go home. You don't need to do this, right?
Isn't that just the whole...
It is, but like in this moment, like I remember this
screaming at Ellie to go home.
This scene in the game, I was like, I'm ready to just brawl and take down this entire city. But here I was like, oh, Ellie, like you now have something like to live for. And like, yes, you've lost your life as it was, but you are gaining your life as it could be. And this is that intersection between the path you're on and the new hope you could have. And it's like, you gotta...
My question is, do you think this is the first real time she's had a different path to choose in her entire life?
I do.
Like, is this the actual first fork in the road for Ellie? It's her first chance at an off-ramp. Yeah. And what does she choose to do? We're going to have to find out.
And Dina's holding her hand saying, I'm in it with you. So, I mean, that's how it ends, man. That's
it. And
I liked this episode. I really liked it. I thought it was a good mix of action, but like the dynamics among the characters. Dina and Isaac again just shine for me here, and
I really love world building and world expanding.
Yeah.
I find it very interesting in shows and movies. So I am here for all of the little details on why things are the way they are in the setting. Almost to the point that I will sacrifice like good character development to find out more about why they like. How do they have natural gas and propane to be able to cook on a commercial stove, and where did Isaac get those pans from, and like what is the story there? And I'm like thinking about that in the back of my mind the whole time while I'm watching them run away from the infected. I'm like, where did he get those pans?
I know, right? Lucked out. There's one final thing I want to mention before we go. Okay, and this doesn't have much to do with the episode, but it has everything to do with the series. As many of our viewers and listeners know, my family has been watching The Last of Us. And yesterday, while I was at a graduation party, I received the following text. Full spoilers for episode 2 of this season. All caps. Wade, Joel is dead. How can they kill Joel? This isn't a show without Joel. I feel unwell. I want to vomit.
Dina did. Twice.
Dina did twice. And so I said, welcome to trauma and the setup for what's next in the most pastoral way.
And you also said, are you pregnant?
Are you pregnant? Just hold on. She said, so here's the thing about when this happens to someone I'm emotionally attached to in a show and they kill them off, I want to stop watching. And it makes me never want to pick it up because I have to grieve. Yeah, I did it with Peaky Blinders, Outlander, etc. And I said, well, the next episode's all about grief. You're going to love that. And she said, well, I will finish it eventually. See you in 2030.
Well, I think that's the sign off. Thanks, everybody. I enjoyed it.
If you've made it this far, you did it. You made it past the hurdle.
And if you're watching this in 2030,
hey, Abby.
If you're watching this in 2030, we just want to say hello from the past. How is the future? Hope it's good.
We're in flying cars. I don't know.
Leave 2030. 5 years from now,
that's like 5 years from 4 years from now. 5 years.
If you're from the
Why
future,
does 2030 feel so far away?
If you're from the future and you're watching this, leave a comment. 2030. There you go. Time capsule. Seal it.
That's it. And when you're lost in the darkness, look for the light.
Look for the right. And lecture plays every Tuesday and Thursday. Make sure to like and subscribe and follow us on socials.
Ring that bell. We're really good at this. Clearly. See ya.
Thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks to Husky by the Geek for our theme music. Thanks to Nick Smith for our graphics. But most of all, thanks to you. This program is brought to you by viewers like you, and we so appreciate you. Hope everything's great in your world, and we will see you on our next episode. Bye-bye.